welcome back to the show now. Lots of us would be curious to see, of course, this Saturday's partial eclipse of the sun. But back in the days of yore, what would our ancestors have made of it all?
Here to tell us all about some of old Irish beliefs and traditions around celestial and other weather events, we have our folklore Shane Lahan with us today. Shane to Folklore. Nínú it isn't it? Yesterday we started looking up into the sky and wondering what's going on.
Well, you know something, it's not. But I was going out, bringing something out to the bin the other day, you know. It was dark, I live out the countryside. And I stopped and I looked up and I said, I don't spend enough time looking at this. What a spectacle over my head. And that's been going on, as you say, Dahi, for thousands and thousands of years. You know, I bring my students up to the Boyne Valley, up to Newgrange, and you know, everyone knows that Newgrange is kind of...
Shane, we're just going to get a mic into you there, because we're having trouble with your mic there as well.
So that's
Newgrange.
This is Curbstone 67. It's around the back. You know, I bring my students around the back, and this one actually is aligned to the equinox, because that's where we're at the moment in the whole setup here, you know. And if you look at it there, one spiral is opening up, as it were, and that's the opening up of the year. You have the two lozenges either side, and then when we get to the equinox, it winds back again. So we have the good part of the year and the bad part of the year. And that's not just a decoration. That's a very specific symbol showing us what people knew about the cycle of time and so on. And not only that, when I bring them as well, I go up to Lough Crew, which is just down the road from Newgrange, another megalithic cemetery, going back to maybe 5,200 years ago, something of that nature.
Yeah.
And what we find in the backstone there, for example, is actually what lots of scholars think is one of the earliest depictions that we have of a
My God, it's unbelievable, Shane.
Yeah.
Would you look at those pictures there and how long we've had them?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's incredible. And so these are some of the images I took myself when we were in Lough Crew. You can see, for example, some of the sun symbols that are there, some other symbols of constellations, for example, all of those sort of things.
My God.
So you've got a really amazing sort of time going back when people looked at all of those sort of
And they
things.
were looking at the constellations and their formations of constellations, which of course then led on to being, you know, the Tropic of Cancer and of course Leo and all of our star signs, as we call them then.
But it comes back. We have another brilliant thing in Ireland, Maura, and that is that when Christianity comes, we have the writing of what we call the annals. Now, the annals are kind of like diary entries about what happens every year, whether there was a famine, a plague, and so on. But amazingly, they record brilliant astronomical events. So this is the Annals of Ulster, for example. Fantastic.
How far back is that?
Manuscript. Well, they go back really to what we call the pre-patrician annals before Christianity, and then working from the 5th century onwards.
Who would have written these?
So the monks would have written these and so on. But what's really good, Dahi, is that they mention things like the eclipses, both solar and lunar eclipses. They mention comets, which they often describe as dragons in the sky, because you can imagine sometimes a falling star, the tail that's there and so on. They even have the aurora, you know, the aurora borealis that's there. Sometimes even, there's one account of a supernova. That's actually the aurora I took myself out my own back garden this year.
Yeah,
that was back in October. We had a fantastic array of that. So when people saw the sky and they saw it changing colour and they saw the moon changing colour, just the other day, of course, we had the blood moon, as it was called.
Right.
Okay,
Beautiful.
people like we now know scientifically that's all got to do with the way in which the infrared light gets to the moon at a particular time. But in the past, they said something's going to happen, there's a portent. People were obsessed actually with, in the Christian world, they were obsessed with the end of the world, the book of Revelations. So every time they saw the blackness coming in, you must remember that in and around the equinox as well, and Easter, when Christ died on the cross, there was darkness fell over the earth. So there was this notion that an eclipse had taken place at that time, and they were looking for that continually. In fact, there was one really interesting thing that I think it was in the Annals of Ulster as well, that they calculated the time sequence, but every 30 years we have a solar eclipse, and they calculated back in the year 664, they counted back to develop the age of Christ. 21 multiplied by 30 gave you 630, and then the 34 years. So they were using all of the observations to work out what was going on.
It's absolutely, you know, I suppose we're so educated in all this now in one sense, Shane. And if you go back to that time, like there was no explaining it in
And there
one
must have
sense.
been a lot of fear though as well.
There was one great entry I found in the Annals of Ulster in the year 939. It says, the colour of blood on the sun. Now, you wouldn't, he said, usually, like, so what was that about? But what we found out, using all sorts of modern techniques, there was actually a volcano went off in Iceland, Eldkau, I think it's pronounced, I might get that wrong, but we know from the Greenland ice cores that are done, we know from the dendrochronology, that in fact, that's exactly what was happening. There was a big cloud of dust going up, and for a day and a half, there was redness all over the sky that was there.
Wow.
So we have independent correlation, if you like, of what was being written in the Irish Annals from the dendrochronology, from the official things. Far from it being hearsay, it was actually bang on.
It was written down. Well, isn't it amazing when you think about without the monks, we would have no knowledge from this period.
Yeah, it's incredible. And there's all sorts of other... there's a great account of Halley's Comet. I think that's very funny. I'll just read it for you. In the year 1066. Now, remember 1066 is important because we remember all that from all of the figures. But he says, a hairy star, strange, enormous, was seen in the air on Tuesday, okay? And he says, such was its size and brightness that men said it was a moon, and at the end of 4 days it remained thus. So you've got 1066, of course, is Halley's Comet, it's on the Bayeux Tapestry and so on. But what's more than that, we know that the very earliest account of Halley's Comet outside Egypt, which also recorded these events, is in Ireland, is in 912. So the astronomers were at their work and doing fantastic things at that time. It's interesting though that we always concern ourselves at this time of the year with the equinox. You know, the way the Earth is on its tilt, and we're right in the middle now, as it were. And as that happens, we get lots of weather events because we're kind of adjusting as time goes on. So when people put these two things together, the blood moon that we had a few weeks ago, and of course now on Saturday, of course we've got the partial eclipse and so on. People always thought that there was something going to happen.
Within the same month as well.
Yeah, the same month,
we've had
the
three
same
now,
time.
haven't we?
That goes right back through time. But there's a load of things that happen. I always think, I remember you talking to me one time, Dahi, about the Scaravine.
Scaravine,
The Scaravine. And the Scaravine, the Guach.
What's Scaravine?
Scaravine was on Garav Shkian, meaning the rough weather. So in and around the end of April, the time of the cuckoo and so on, that sometimes you think everything is over and everything is fine. This terrible bout of weather comes your way. And that's all got to do with this change in the year and the change in time.
But if the weather was bad during the Scaravine, you were going to have a bad summer then as well.
That's right. But there was a whole pile of things that, you know, I collected a whole bunch of them here for you, you know. A wet March makes a bad harvest. If March comes in like a lion, it'll go out like a lamb. March winds and April showers bring forth May flowers. You know, we have, if it's thunder on Fool's Day, which is coming up, it brings good crops for corn and hay. Like, they're all
beware the Ides of March, wasn't that?
But all of the proverbs were there and all of the different ideas.
But they made sense though.
They did. There was a great sense.
See, it's always looking to nature, isn't it, Shane? I mean, they read the world through nature.
The one I love always, and I remember my lovely neighbour Durham Callahan, he told me, the oak before the ash splash, the ash before the oak soak. So I'm watching the buds coming out on the ash tree and the oak tree, seeing who's going to win, because I don't want it to be a soak, I want it to be only a splash.
And even Christy Ring as well, when he used to talk about hurling and everything, not until the cuckoo sings.
That's right, you know.
That's when things got serious.
Yeah, no, but you had all of that sort of idea as well.
Listen, we have to talk about the Child of Prague, we're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
Seriously, this is a well-worn Child of, this is a working Child of Prague.
This is my Child of Prague, right? And I put this out for every occasion I can, every Munster final I can, every occasion for a wedding or neighbours and so on. You can see the weather hasn't been great because it's almost dissolved away. It's gone rusty, if you like. But we always had that tradition of trying to use whatever sort of folklore and traditions we had to alter the weather. And the Child of Prague is an amazing sort of entity, very popular in Ireland, not so popular elsewhere.
Every house had a Child of Prague years ago. When my mother was young or my father, they all had a Child of Prague.
So sometimes they topple off and the head would fall off. A lot of people felt that they were lucky if they were headless. And I've often heard as well that people would actually dig a hole in the ground and put them upside down
for a wedding.
So there was all of that.
Especially for the night before a wedding, apparently.
But it's a part of the Irish tradition, and I love it. And every chance I get, I chat to people about the Child of Prague. People will have all their different omens relating to that. So
Shane, it's fabulous. Thank you for all of this. It's just brilliant.
Just with what's happening on Saturday, good or bad luck for both those things happening in the same month?
Dahi, looking at it's only good luck. From me, I'll only give all the positive. That's what we need. That's what we
certainly do.
Shane, great to have you as always.
And if you're interested in the eclipse that's happening on Saturday,